Your reference photos could very well be the reason why you're struggling so much through your drawing or painting processes, why you're not able to arrive at those results that you're after. Not to mention, if you don't know how to choose reference photos that are appropriate for art making purposes, you could also greatly hinder the development of your technical skills. And this is why in today's video, I'm going to be sharing the top 3 mistakes that I often see beginners make when it comes to choosing reference photos for art making purposes. So let's jump right into the first mistake. And this one is using photos that are very small or blurry or pixelated. It doesn't matter if your art style is very expressive and loose and you're not planning on adding very much detail, or if you are into higher levels of realism and very detailed work. A high quality reference photo is going to provide you lots of visual information that you as the artist have the opportunity to break down and decide whether you want to bring in or leave out or simplify or do whatever you wish to do with it. The more visual information you have, the more options you have, the more you have to choose from. Remove, take out, change, bring in, and enhance. Do what you wish to. Quality images also remind us of these little subtleties and nuances, these little things that we would have otherwise probably forgotten unless we have photographic memory or we have been studying and practicing with that particular object or subject for a long period of time. Not to mention, if you are going for mid to higher levels of realism, you want to be able to clearly see things like cast shadows, highlights, midtones, and darks, so that you can make them happen in your drawing or painting. Otherwise, you're going to be making things up and you can end up with something that looks very inconsistent when it comes to the light situation and the environment. I always make sure that the images that I choose are large enough and clear enough that I am able to zoom into certain sections as I am making my way around the piece, especially in those last parts of the drawing or painting process when I'm getting into the finer details. Moving into mistake number 2 that I often see beginners make when choosing photos for art making purposes, and this one is using over or underexposed photos. Photos that are overexposed are going to be very light overall. So they're going to lack darker midtones and darkest darks. I would never recommend using a photo taken with flash for drawing or painting purposes. On the other hand, a photo that is underexposed is going to be very dark and is going to be missing the lighter values. Have you ever been working on a drawing or a painting for several hours and no matter how much you do, it still ends up looking flat? The reason why this is happening is very likely because that reference photo that you're using is not showing that wide range of values that you need, those lights, that wide range of midtones, and those darkest darks to make something look realistic. If you want to create believable depth on a flat two-dimensional surface like a piece of paper or a canvas, you need to be able to observe those lights, those midtones, and those darkest darks so that you can recreate them via drawing or painting, and that is what's going to create that sense of light and shadow, that 3D-ness, and that depth that you want. Value, otherwise known as tone, is number 1 when it comes to creating that optical illusion of depth on a flat two-dimensional piece of paper or canvas. And if you're not able to pinpoint those different value shapes and lights and midtones and darks in your reference photos, how are you going to make them happen in your drawings or paintings? You can certainly try to develop higher levels of contrast, but you're going to be guessing and you could end up with good or bad results if you're still working on developing your ability to pinpoint different value areas in your reference photos so that you can make them happen in your drawings or paintings. I would highly recommend working with monochromatic or grayscale photos so that instead of having to discern between lighter and value areas with all of these different colors present in a full color photo, everything is synthesized for you and unified into one single color scale. So you see the darkest version of the color, so let's say black, Then you see a wide range of grays from darker gray to lighter gray, and you have white as your lightest value. Moving on to mistake number 3, and this one is using photos that are cropped in weird ways or with too little negative space around the object or the subject. And I see this affecting people's processes in 2 different ways. So let me explain the first. Say you're drawing or painting a portrait of a person, and part of their head is cropped off the picture. Or maybe you're using a photo where the person is wearing a hat that is creating a pretty large shadow in the top part of their face, so you're not really able to see their eyes very clearly, and plane changes throughout the head structure. This is incredibly important, especially when you're drawing or painting something that requires very specific shapes and proportions, such as anything anatomical or even animals. As humans, we can tell errors in proportions when it comes to faces very easily. Even if we cannot tell exactly where the error is, we can tell that something is off because we see faces so much throughout the day. Artists who are farther ahead, they know about body proportions and facial proportions, and they have practiced this kind of subject so much, they can get away with using subpar photos, and they can make up for the information that they're visually lacking. But as a beginner, you want to make sure that you have as much information as possible. You can clearly see those structures as best as you can, so that you can observe all of that and then make that happen in your drawing or painting. And again, as I said in the beginning, it is 100% up to you to decide how you're going to be making use of this information depending on the outcome and the style that you're after. But starting with a subpar photo that is lacking essential pieces of information that you can observe and really digest and take from is going to make it so that you're already starting your piece with a faulty foundation. And another way that weirdly cropped photos can affect your drawing or painting process or outcome has to do with composition. See, we need to remember that when it comes to designing aesthetically pleasing, balanced looking compositions, positive and negative spaces are very important. And if we don't have enough negative space around our objects or subjects, things can end up looking very cramped, which can make the composition look off and can even transmit a sense of overwhelm or chaos that we're not necessarily looking to transmit to the viewer. And on the other hand, leaving too much negative space around our objects or subjects can make them look like they are a tiny thing that is lost in a vast sea of emptiness. There has to be some kind of balance and play between positive and negative spaces or active and inactive areas in our visual compositions. Make sure that you're providing enough breathing room around your objects or subjects, and that you're giving the viewer's eyes a place to rest, but also make sure that your focal point object or subject is large enough that you're actually providing it the importance that it deserves, and so that it has enough visual weight so that the viewer's eyes can go straight to that area. A huge tip for you when you're taking your own photos of still life arrangements or scenes is actually zoom out and give yourself even more negative space than you think you'll need, because it's better to have more negative space than too little negative space, because this way you can easily open up your images in a photo editing software and simply crop it to your liking. Whereas if you don't have enough inactive area around your focal point objects or subjects, whatever it is that you're drawing or painting, you're likely going to have to draw and paint those things from imagination if you want to add more inactive area around them. I do have a video where I explain about the rule of thirds, which is a principle that can really help you improve your visual compositions and make them look more aesthetic, more balanced, and more interesting to the viewer. And I share how to apply this principle using a wide range of different photos. I'll make sure to link to it down below in case you'd like to check it out. And I also have a great video where I talk about why it's so important to stop trying to copy your reference photos exactly as they are. I explain why going in with this mentality all the time is going to hold you back from developing your artistic style and voice, so I would highly recommend checking that one out as well. I'll link to it down below. I always recommend taking your own reference photos because this is going to help you grow much faster. Why? Because as you're taking your photo, you're giving thought to composition. And when you're using other people's photos, those compositions have been created for you. Not to mention, when you take your own photos, you are in full control and you're building that piece from the ground up. Everything is your own from the beginning. But I do know that taking your own photos is not always practical. And what if I want to draw or paint a polar bear and I don't have polar bears around? In those cases, I think it's perfectly fine to use other people's photos as long as you have permission to do so. And I am so grateful that nowadays with the internet, we have many different websites that we can go to find references that we can use for art making purposes with no issues. We can also buy photo packs directly from photographers and learn from photographers so that we can take our own reference photos quickly and easily. But I know that when I was first getting started, I was very nervous and stressed because I didn't want to get into trouble when sharing work online that I created off other people's photos. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see a video from me where I share my best tips that help me stay out of trouble when using other people's photos for art making purposes, and I'd be super happy to make that happen for you. In the meantime, check out this video where I talk about why it's so important to bring in a lot of yourself and a lot of your choices even when you're using a reference photo for art making purposes, and I provide lots of helpful tips that will help you do this more easily.